The only way you can fulfill your God-given potential is by improving the way you act. You won't fulfill your calling with your current behaviors and skill set. Good behaviors must get stronger, poor behaviors need to be removed, and you must implement relevant behaviors that you currently don't possess. Your current level of love isn't enough to help you fulfill your God-given mission. Refusing to kick laziness out of your life is killing your calling, and we must implement relevant behaviors like biblical literacy to have any shot at being who God created us to be. The best way to improve how we act is by surrendering our lives totally to God. Anything less than wholehearted devotion to God will leave you with unfulfilled potential at best and a life totally separated from God at worst. So, to encourage you to surrender your life and to help you fulfill your calling, here are 5 simple but profound ways wholehearted devotion to God can change the way you act. Surrender doesn't have to be complex, and its rewards are life-changing and eternally significant. The first simple but profound way that wholehearted devotion to God will change the way you act is by moving you from self-centered to God-centered. In Matthew chapter 22, Jesus is being questioned by all kinds of people. And one question he gets asked is, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus replies with this: love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A life wholly devoted to God is a life where God remains the focal point. He is our number one priority and our most important relationship. This changes our behaviors because now we're no longer the center of our own lives. God is. He is our hope, our greatest desire, and the aspiration that we walk towards. And going from self-centered to God-centered realigns a very important desire in our lives: our desire for self-preservation. This is simple but profound because most of what people do is centered around self-preservation. Now, self-preservation isn't bad, but how we go about getting self-preservation can be bad. Jesus says in Luke chapter 9, verse 23 and 24, he's talking to a group of people, and he says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. When we strive for self-preservation apart from God, we end up losing everything that we're striving for. That's because our efforts apart from God are finite and temporary. On the contrary, everything that we do for God and with God has eternal significance because God is eternal and He sustains everything connected to Him. Counterintuitively, the best way to go about gaining self-preservation and having self-preservation is by losing your life in service to God. This changes our actions because now we don't live to preserve ourselves, we live to please God. We don't go out and pursue relationships or wealth, status, success, or security. We simply pursue Him. And when we pursue God, He will bless us with everything that we need to live the blessed life that He has for us. And before I move on, I need to define what I mean by wholehearted devotion to God. Wholehearted devotion simply means that you withhold nothing from God. Your past, your present, your future, your dreams, your ideas, your goals, your relationships, everything is submitted to and surrendered to God. Anything less than wholehearted devotion is partial devotion. But the goal of this channel is to help you grow and maintain wholehearted devotion, not just partial devotion to God. The second simple but profound way is that we move from self-love in an ungodly way to godly self-love. Before you love anybody else, you've got to know and learn how to love yourself. As Pete Scazzero put it, you can't give what you don't possess, meaning that if you don't have love, you can't give love. Jesus puts this wonderfully in Matthew chapter 22, verse 39. After He gives the first greatest command, He gives the second. He says, and the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. So in an under the radar way, the command to love others is also a command to love yourself. Now, from my perspective, self-love doesn't seem to be very well defined in our culture. To me, from the outside looking in, self-indulgence sounds like and it looks like a combination of truly wanting to love yourself and self-indulgence. Now, loving yourself is good, but self-indulgence is bad. So to avoid the toxic self-indulgent nature that we can be prone to, Jesus gives us a wonderful way to love ourselves, a godly way to love ourselves. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, Paul is speaking to the Corinthians, and he wants them to know that the greatest gift they could give somebody means nothing if they don't love their brothers and sisters. And then he goes on to define what love actually means. In verse 4 of chapter 13, Paul says that love is patient, love is kind, it is not envious, and it doesn't boast. It's not proud. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices with the truth. It always protects. It always trusts. It always helps. And it always perseveres. Now, although these verses are talking about people loving other people, these are great verses that we can use to help us love ourselves in a godly way. For example, in verse 4, it starts off by saying love is patient and love is kind. So all you have to do is ask yourself, am I kind to myself? Am I patient with myself? And as you apply these verses to your life, you learn how to love yourself. And again, we see in verse 6 that love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. We can ask ourselves, is there anywhere in my life where I am delighting in evil? If so, then I'm not really loving myself. And where wholehearted devotion comes into play is that one, it helps us live these verses towards ourselves, but then two, it makes sure that we don't skip over the verses that are difficult or hard for us to do. For example, there may be somewhere in your life where you are delighting in evil. With partial devotion, you will be willing to skip over this and make excuses. But when you have total devotion, you do not allow yourself to skip over difficult or challenging Bible verses. Instead, you say, Lord, help me rejoice in the truth in this area. So love yourself God's way instead of loving yourself in a self-indulgent, I'm going to do what I want to do kind of way. And this is beautiful and profound because when you really live wholehearted devotion out, you not only change how you love towards yourself, but you change how you love towards others. You go from self-centered to others-centered or others-focused. When you put God as the main focus in your life and you love yourself well, you are in the perfect position to love others well. With the same kindness that God has given you and the same kindness you show towards yourself, you're then able to give that to other people. The same protection that God gives you and the same protection you give towards yourself, you're now able to freely give that to other people. You can truly go from self-centered to others-centered. The fourth simple but profound way that wholehearted devotion to God will change the way you act is that it will make sure that no behavior goes unchecked. And here's what I mean by this. In 1 Peter chapter 1, the Apostle Peter is writing to churches to encourage them during times of persecution. And he begins the letter by saying, as obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. But just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. The Apostle Peter said to be holy in all you do, just as God is holy. To be holy means that something is excellent, morally pure, a cut above the rest, and or utterly unique. So that means that everything that we do should be excellent, morally pure, so on and so forth. And this is in contrast to the evil desires that we once had and that we once lived with. Our new desires and new behaviors should be better than those old desires. They should be a cut above them. But Peter says to be holy in all you do. This suggests that we need to be excellent in every action. There isn't an action that we have that is beyond the scrutiny of holiness. And when we live with partial devotion to God, it's really easy to change all in this sentence to say, be holy in some of the things that you do, or many of the things, or convenient things. But wholehearted devotion to God demands that all remains all. We willingly allow ourselves to be scrutinized by God's standard of holiness. And any action that is not holy is repented of and removed as soon as possible. Lastly, just as no behavior is left unchecked, no thought is left unchecked. In 2 Corinthians chapter 10, the Apostle Paul is writing to the Corinthian church, and he is having to defend himself, and he's having to come against different arguments and insults against him and his character and his authority. And in this chapter, we read in verses 4 and 5 that the weapons we fight with are not weapons of this world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. Now, although the context of this was Paul using this to come against arguments that were coming against him, he says the word, we take captive every thought, which again suggests that this can apply to any thought that is trying to set itself up against the knowledge of God in our lives. Now, every thought that comes into our mind comes under the scrutiny of, is this thought for God or against God? Is this thought pushing me towards God or separating me from God? And again, when we live with partial devotion to God, it's really, really easy to change every thought in this verse to, we take captive some thoughts, or easy thoughts, or convenient thoughts. But wholehearted devotion to God demands that we let every remain every. When we live with partial devotion to God, we will allow thoughts in our mind that should not be there. They degrade who we are. They degrade our humanity. They degrade our relationship with God. They degrade our relationship with one another, all because we are allowing it to live there. But the scrutiny of holiness and the scrutiny of taking captive every thought demands that we say no more in Jesus' name. I'm not allowing this thought to rule. I'm not allowing this thought to reign. I'm not allowing this thought to have any power in my life anymore. And we take it captive, not because of partial devotion, not because it's easy, but because we are totally and fully devoted to God. And when we walk in and live with wholehearted devotion to King Jesus, every remains every, and we allow our minds to be strongholds for Him, not strongholds for things that would bring Him down and separate us from Him. Every thought that does not align to God needs to be kicked out as soon as identified. If you choose to embrace wholehearted devotion to God, then this is a snapshot of what your life can look like. Remember, how we act is tied to our devotion. With total devotion to God, we can be confident we will look a bit more godly every day, and we can know that reaching our full God-given potential will be right within our grasp. Check out these videos for motivation on living a devoted life, and thanks for watching.